Oh, hello. I almost didn't see you there. My name is Dillon. I'm the pastor at Manchester United Methodist Church, and I've always kind of wanted to start one of these videos just like that. It's a little bit like how they may have started a mid-90s children's TV program. And that's a little bit what I'm going for here today. I guess a little bit of a gimmick. I've got a blanket around my shoulders here, and a little bit childlike, because what I'd like to talk about is the spiritual power of napping. And yes, you heard me right, the spiritual practice of spending some time in the middle of your day not doing any work and sleeping instead. And I promise you, this is in fact a scriptural notion. Let me tell you where I'm pulling it from. It's this fantastic, maybe tongue-in-cheek interpretation of a story of Elijah. It's here in 1 Kings chapter 19. Now Elijah has just had a run-in with some false prophets. He may or may not have killed all of them, and he may or may not be in deep trouble as a result. And so he's freaking out a little bit and running away and fearing for his life. Here's 1 Kings 19. I'm starting in verse 3. Elijah was terrified. He got up and ran for his life. He arrived at Beersheba in Judah and left his assistant there. He himself went farther on into the desert a day's journey. He finally sat down under a solitary broom bush. He longed for his own death. "It's more than enough, Lord. Take my life, because I'm no better than my ancestors." He lay down and slept under the solitary broom bush. Then suddenly a messenger tapped him and said to him, "Get up, eat something." Elijah opened his eyes and saw flatbread baked on glowing coals and a jar of water right by his head. He ate and drank and then went back to sleep. The Lord's messenger returned a second time and tapped him. "Get up," the messenger said. "Eat something, because you have a difficult road ahead of you." Elijah got up, ate and drank, and went refreshed by that food for 40 days and nights until he arrived at Horeb, God's mountain. And that is a quick transition from fearing from his life, wishing he was dead, to being at God's mountain. He goes from here to have a pretty intense encounter with God. And what was it that turned it all around? A snack and a nap. Which again, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but the practice of napping isn't actually all that outside of the scriptural tradition. In the very beginning, God institutes a practice for us all, which is to say that we work for 6 days, and then we rest for a day. There is something deeply important about taking time off where we're not working and trusting that life goes on just the same, that God is in fact in charge enough that we can rest every once in a while. And so we have 6 days on and 1 day off, but also perhaps a few hours on, an hour of napping. And the challenge oftentimes, at least I have found this, is that we so frequently tie our worth and our value to our productivity. We have this ingrained work ethic which says that we have to do a lot in order to justify our place, in order to justify having the things that we have, that we should work hard in order to get anything, that we should pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, that it is our blood, sweat, and tears which allows us to eke out a living in this life. The only trouble with that is that it's a very simple formula, that you get what you work for. And the premise of Scripture is that God gives more than we could ever earn. And so it doesn't seem quite right to build a whole life based around a different formula than the one that God works on. And in fact, there's a whole parable you might remember talking about how people who worked for different amounts of time throughout a day all got the same paycheck at the end. That our value and the things that we should have in life are not intended to be based around what we have earned, but based on the intrinsic value that we have to God. And so it is good to work. It is very good to work. it's also good to rest. We have the freedom to do both. And so, I invite you today, if you think you might need a nap, even if you think you might not, consider taking one, letting things run without you for a moment. Get some rest and know that God is in charge and doles out with abundance and generosity that isn't based on what we have earned. Have a blessed and restful day, friends. Go in peace.